Hi, everybody. Apologies for production day, last minute. We're going to do this through a video, and I want you to take notes. And then there will be a assignment on Canvas um, called MIDI Beat Clock lecture. And all you're going to do is just input a couple questions or comments that you have after watching this video. Of course, I'll review those questions, and then I can give more information on this or on that to answer your questions on Monday. But make sure you input something there so I know that you watched the lecture and can give you credit for it. Um, it'll be due by Saturday night. So let's get into it. We're talking about MIDI beat clock today. A couple key terms we need to know beforehand. It's talking about the conductor track and the tempo map. So the tempo map is a list of tempo changes that occur during a piece of music. So anytime you have tempo changes, you go from a slower speed to a faster speed, and then or changing speed in the middle of a song in regards to tempo. That's a tempo map. It's just a list of the tempo changes. We can see those in a linear fashion on a DAW, which is quite nice on the timeline. Now, the conductor track is what holds the tempo track. It's the special track used to house and store the tempo map in the same way that a track in Pro Tools stores the audio or the MIDI information. So in Pro Tools, if you're looking at it, this is your tempo map right up here. If you click on the little downward arrow, here's your tempo map. If you can also have your meters, right? Like if you're doing 4/4 time or 3/4 time, you can change the meter on the map this way as well. If you're missing any of these, you can just right click and you can make sure you get tempo. Like I just uncheck it, but I'll put it back in so I can see it. That way you can manage this so it's not just huge. Now here's the conductor track, and then here's my tempo map. I can use my pencil tool. I'm at a density of 250 milliseconds right here. As I make these changes, you can kind of see how it makes a tempo map. It's not in a linear fashion. It's stepped. I can do that in a finer degree by going to 50 milliseconds. See, it's in a finer degree. I can also just use my pencil tool to do stuff like that. Or on my smart tool, I can hold control and make new ones. And then you can, of course, highlight them and delete them if you're done with it. Now, none of your items on the tempo map will work if you don't have your conductor track on. That's this guy right here, right under your transport or right on your transport. You turn that off and look, tempo map is gone. You just are doing manual tempo. So I'll put it back on. Okay, let's get back into the lecture. So MIDI beat clock, aka MIDI clock or MIDI timing clock, it's just different depending on who's talking about it, manufacturers and such. But these are the common ones. So MIDI beat clock is a series of messages that are used to synchronize MIDI devices to a single clock transmitter. The clock is typically provided by a DAW in computer-based setups. So in Pro Tools, we're going to have Pro Tools generate our MIDI beat clock, or a sequencer or drum machine in hardware-only setup. So I can have a sequencer or a drum machine be generating the MIDI beat clock. In simpler terms, it's a way to set MIDI devices to one tempo. So let's compare MIDI beat clock to MIDI timecode, MTC. MIDI beat clock, like we've mentioned, transmit and help sync via BPM. It's BPM based. It doesn't have anything to do with time. System common message, or like time as in like second 1, second 2, frame 1, stuff like that. It's a system common message. Therefore, when you turn that function on, it sends out to all the MIDI ports. So it's kind of just set it and leave it, and it's done. It goes everywhere. The signal is sent every 24 ppqn. We're going to talk about pulses per quarter notes probably next week. So we'll just keep that in the back of our brains. Now, MIDI timecode, on the other hand, transmits timecode, hours, minutes, seconds, frames. It's time-based, frame-based. So while you can technically use MIDI timecode to sync BPM, It's much more common to use the MIDI beat clock for this. MTC is channelized though, meaning that it needs to be sent out specific MIDI ports. So you have to say, okay, I want MIDI timecode to go out this channel, and this channel. So it's a little bit more specific. All right, let's get into our situation here to see what we have to do. So here's Pro Tools, and then I also have, I have the Rhythm Designer RD8, the Behringer unit. Mike was kind enough to let me borrow this. So right now, I have it set to its an internal. You probably can't read it because the camera is not as good quality, but it's set to its internal clock right now. So I have it set to it's running its own clock. So if I change the BPM here, it'll reflect. Now I have the audio output of this going into Pro Tools. So that's this track right here. It's receiving on analog input number 1. I'm just in input mode, so it's always passing through. So if I hit play in Pro Tools, let's go ahead and, there we are. If I hit play in Pro Tools, nothing should happen over here. Nothing, right? However, if I hit play here, it works, right? So let's go ahead and just, so we can see how this is working. I'll get onto like the hand claps right there. I'll get into my record mode and hit play, and I can add in. Too loud, let's turn them down. Oh, that's it on maracas, so let's hit the hand claps. That's nice. What's kind of fun is if I get out of record mode, anything I put in will just be deleted on the next pass. Kind of fun. So I hit stop, and then it stops on the unit, right? So that's when I'm using the actual internal sequencer of this 808 right here, or the Behringer RD8. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to set it to the next kind of sync it can handle. We have internal, MIDI, USB, and clock. We're just going to go to MIDI right here. We're not going to worry about these other two. This is the more common way. We click that. Now we are now trying to sync through MIDI. At the back of this, I have MIDI in and MIDI out. Those are both connected. It's like MIDI cables right here, and then on the other side is a USB that plugs into my computer. So I have MIDI in and MIDI out through USB to a MIDI cable. I got the output of anything my computer sends out. So the output MIDI goes to the input of this, and then I also have this set to its MIDI output. It has a MIDI output, goes to the MIDI input of Pro Tools. So now we have it set to MIDI. Let's hit play in Pro Tools. Nothing. I'm going to go ahead and turn that clock off, or that click off. It's not working because we haven't turned on our MIDI beat. So click setup, MIDI, MIDI beat clock. And here you can see, here's my USB MIDI ports that I have. I know that I'm using port 1. And I know this thing, the RD8, is already on channel 1, which I know it's set to, so that's fine. I just can leave it. I click OK. Now, when I hit play, it plays over here. Now hit stop in Pro Tools. It stops. Hit play in Pro Tools again. It plays. But now, one thing you'll notice though is listen to the click along with it. You can hear it slightly offbeat. That's because I've got a weird delay in my system somewhere, and I'll bet you it's from the MIDI cable because it was probably like $20 on Amazon 10 years ago. So I'll bet you that's what's going on. There's something funny, but it's okay. It's still workable. I could always just record the part I want and then nudge it back by a couple samples until it's on beat again. But watch this. If I go ahead and I'm going to go to my conductor track and I'm going to make a little tempo map right there. If I hit play, you'll watch the BPM over here. Yeah, I should probably scoot that up, huh? We're getting to the tempo map change. Look, it reflected. That's good. Now because I'm synced with MIDI, if I hit play here, it doesn't work, right? Because it's waiting. This is slaved to the Pro Tools MIDI beat clock. So that's kind of fun. I have my RD8 synced with Pro Tools, so I could technically, throw in, play a piano along with it or something like that. I can also record it in, right? Now I don't have to worry about resetting this up. Of course, if I want to make changes, then I'm going to have to recall it exactly the way it was and then re-record it into Pro Tools. Okay, now here's another interesting thing. Remember when I went, the unit has MIDI output, right? So I went MIDI out to the Pro Tools MIDI in that I have, and I'll go ahead and create an instrument track. We'll go ahead and throw Mini Grand on there. All right. Now notice how I got my instruments tab on. So this is sending out, this is receiving all MIDI data. Any MIDI data that it receives is going to send out to the Mini Grand plugin. So if I click on, I'm playing the Akai on my left-hand side off camera. But check this out. Let's say I actually hit the record on that now. I am not going to hit the Akai. I'm going to be touching nothing after I hit record. So this was sending MIDI out. It's sending out the MIDI it was generating to Pro Tools. This track is receiving all MIDI information, and so this is the MIDI data that the RD8 generated and sent in, because I had the MIDI output of this connected to the MIDI input of Pro Tools. Likewise, what I can also do, because remember this is still receiving MIDI, I have a MIDI track right here. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. I'll put an input so we can still have it. The MIDI track, if you look at it, I mean, look, there's no plugins, no inserts or sends or anything like that, right? So it's just MIDI. I have the output of this MIDI track in Pro Tools. It's going to send its MIDI information to USB port 1, and I know that this is set to channel 1. The RD8 is set to channel 1. So I already know it. I don't have to change that. Always good to double check your documentation to know what channels are preset and such. So now when I hit record on here, I'm now going to hit notes on the Akai MIDI keyboard. Oh, whoops. Okay, we're good. Uh-oh, it's not working. Oh, something's funny because, look, we're not even sending information out this thing anymore. I think this thing just lost itself. Cool, there we are. Okay, I got it back. I don't know what happened. Maybe it lost sync for a second and it had to come back to itself. When I hit play again, then it worked out pretty well. Oh, yeah, because this is receiving the MIDI data. So when I hit play, and then this is sending back out to the RD8. So that's why you hear that doubling up effect. But check this out. I'm playing on the MIDI keyboard now. Oh. So I can also trigger the RD8 individual like bass drum, snare, hi-hats and such with my MIDI keyboard, because my MIDI keyboard is plugged into Pro Tool or into my computer through USB. This MIDI track is receiving all MIDI input, and then we're sending out that MIDI information directly to what this is connected to, the MIDI output cable, port 1, channel 1. So this is done. This is all set up and ready to go. However, if I want to be able to trigger this, I had to get off the MIDI clock, right? Because I want to be able to record, right? So I just recorded that on the MIDI keyboard. Undo that, and now when I record on this, my RD8 is not chasing Pro Tools. It's no longer slave to it because I'm on the internal clock, not on the MIDI clock that's generated from Pro Tools. So now if I record into Pro Tools, I mean, it'd be a much better idea to quantize this first before doing that, right? But it's a kind of a fun way you can use. So you can use something like this, older pieces of equipment for their fun sequencers and cool things they have. You just want to make sure that it's synced to MIDI beat clock so that Pro Tools can interact with it. When you hit start and stop, it'll interact in Pro Tools. Or you can, record some MIDI performances and have that trigger your external unit right here. Okay, so make sure you've written down any questions that you've had for this lecture, and then you're going to input those questions or comments into the assignment on Canvas due before Saturday night. I'm also going to be posting the soundscape prompt, and so you'll have a few weeks to start working on that as well. So look forward to both of those assignments, and I will see you guys on Monday. Have a good weekend.